Be great.
I would love to have that, Greg. We would definitely get hit with a copyright, though, no doubt about it. So, all right, let's get into it. AZ Marky Mark in the Patreon questions for the show said, "Hey, Posse and Clayton, I feel the team had a great draft." Clapping emoji. Thank you, sir. PFF scored our draft with a B-. My question to the show and Posse is, how did the other teams in the black and blue division do? Did we step up so we can get back to beating them down repeatedly? So before we dive into kind of a little NFC North preview here, I figured it'd be a good a time as any to do that. What's your all's take on that? Do you feel like the Packers closed the gap and maybe took back over the North with what they did this offseason? And he's asking specifically about the draft, so let's try to keep it there on that topic. But Emilio, you're going to be a problem tonight, sir. You're going to be a problem.
Ron Sample's the problem currently. But, yeah, no, I think that the division itself is obviously getting stronger. With the Lions are going to try to hang as many banners as they can. Vikings will see what they do coming out of that 14 win that we didn't expect. I think you have to get double-digit wins to get into the playoffs in this division. Mm-hmm. The question is how many teams are going to be, at double-digit this year. I think that's where we're kind of hung up.
Go Pack, go all day says, biggest question is, will the Packers have a pass rush this season? That's a great question. Go Pack, go all day. I just hope somehow, some way they can finish in the top 10 in sacks. You know what I mean? If they could do that, that would be a huge step up from last year, right, where they finished 8th in sacks. But anyway, Jacob, sir, how would you answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but the Bears did themselves pretty well in the draft. I think I agree with Jerry. Minnesota had very few picks, and with their first pick overall, they went with that interior offensive lineman, which I know had a lot of people scratching their heads. I don't think that they addressed a lot of their needs that a lot of my friends that are Vikings fans, they just didn't think that it was an overall good draft whatsoever. Of course, I think somebody said that they got the best grade. Well, that's how it usually works, whatever. But the Lions, I think, had a solid draft. And to be honest, without sounding like a homer, I think the Packers are right up there. And depending on a few of these picks, if they really hit, then I think it's obviously we're going to be homers. And we've spent so much time looking into each of these players. And now we've grown accustomed to the ones we did pick. So there's going to be a bias there. But even if I take a step back, I will. I think that we did good. If I had to grade them, I'd say that we did a solid B. I think that the Vikings are like a C. Detroit, what I'd say a B. Chicago, I'd say probably a B plus.
Gotcha. All right. I personally don't like the whole, grading draft classes. I kind of,
it's stupid.
It's kind of silly, But with that being said, let's kind of dive into the North here, man. As Drew D says, the Lions are trying to get as many divisional titles as we have world championships. That really puts things into perspective, right? Sure. So, all right. So what I did was just a quick little breakdown of the NFC North. Here were the final standings. You had the Detroit Lions in first place at 15-2, the Vikings in second place at 14-3, the Packers in third place at 11-6, and then the Bears sitting at 5-12. We're going to get to the draft classes here in just a second. Just want to kind of look at where each of these teams finished in specific statistical categories and where they need to improve to, for the Packers to potentially take over the North, or, for the Lions or Vikings to potentially lose it. So I just love seeing the Bears down there in the basement once again. Hearing their fans in the offseason, man, you'd think they won the damn North, It's amazing how that works. So one thing I will point out is the Packers, obviously finishing the season on a 2-game losing streak, right? Never want to end the season that way, obviously. Majority of the time your season is going to end with a loss, but they definitely played their worst football down the stretch, in my opinion. And really excited to kind of see everybody get a fresh start this year for sure. So offensive points per play. Would you guys rather jump into the key statistics for each of these teams, or would you rather hit the draft classes first? I'll let you guys call a shot, and then we can come back to the stats if you need to. What do you think?
I'd say draft class if you guys didn't mind.
Cool. Let's do draft classes first then. We'll come back to some of these key statistics from last year. Okay, so obviously the Packers draft class, we'll roll through it real quick here. Pick 23 in the first round, Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. Round 2, pick 54, Anthony Belton, offensive tackle, North Carolina State. Round 3, pick 87, Savion Williams, wide receiver out of TCU. Round 4, you went Barron Sorrell, edge defender out of Texas. Round 5, Colin Oliver, linebacker / edge out of Oklahoma State. Round 6, Warren Brinson, defensive tackle out of Georgia, which if we have time, we'll hit his scouting report today. Round 7, you had 2 picks. Micah Robinson, cornerback out of Tulane. Really excited about the potential upside of him. And then round 7, pick 250, John Williams, listed as a guard out of Cincinnati, although he played tackle in college. So the Packers ended a 23-year streak of not drafting a wide receiver in the first round by selecting Matthew Golden, a speedy playmaker for Jordan Love. Savion Williams adds versatility, drawing Deebo Samuel comparisons. The team focused on offensive weapons early, but addressed defensive needs with Sorrell, Oliver, and Brinson, though some analysts noted they waited late to bolster their pass rush. So that's the Packers draft class. Anything you guys want to add to that draft class? Because what I see there are 3 potential day one contributors, really 4 with Barron Sorrell. I think Barron Sorrell is going to be put into the rotation if he looks as advertised in camp, if that makes sense. But anything you guys want to add to that before we get to the next draft class here?
No, I mean, I think that's fair. I was going to say 4. And I would even maybe throw in, Brinson could possibly be in a rotation a lot more than maybe we're thinking with the lack of Slayton being gone and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, Barron Sorrell, heck, Colin Oliver could beat out McDuffie, you know what I mean? Or just make some sort of impact. But I definitely think that the first 4 there have a shot to see some significant playing time. And just in general, I mean, again, we've looked at these guys, but the Packers, all of these guys have a shot at least competing. And if they are, killing it in OTAs, killing it in the early season and killing it throughout the beginning of the year, there's chances that they could actually see some playing time, some substantial playing time. And like you said, I agree. Micah Robinson, for whatever reason, just feels like he could be another Valentine,
Yeah,
absolutely. And thinking about it, we talked a lot beginning of the draft. Hey, are we going to go get 12 picks? The problem is, how many spots on this roster do we actually have bringing in all these draft picks? I think that's where we're going to run into that biggest issue. Normally, Goody wants to keep every single draft pick and bring them in. It's going to be tough. I think it's going to be real tough this year.
Yeah. Daryl in the chat says, what if Sorrell becomes the next Clay Matthews because of the 6'3", 256 frame? The thing I like about Sorrell, and we got his chalk talk ready to go. I don't think we'll have time tonight, but it's queued up just in case we do have time. He's a dog, man. You can see him beating double teams with power. He's also got some burst and bend off the edge. He's got that punch pull and rip move, or just punch and pull move. He kind of steers clear of the rip a little bit, which is a good thing given the NFL rules and the fact that offensive linemen can't hold if you use a rip move. So Clay Matthews comp, little too rich for me, Daryl, but I know what you're talking about, man. When you see Sorrell on tape, man, I think there's a legit shot for him to potentially be that third pass rusher on this team. It's going to come down to, I think, him and Brenton Cox Jr. day one is what it's going to come down to. I really do. So, and whichever one of those guys impressed the coaches the most, that's probably the one who's going to get the majority of the snaps coming out in that 3-man rotation.
I think Cox is going to rise to the challenge.
Heard it from a fan right here.
Andy Monday says that Brinson's going to be the new trash can full of dirt. I hope so.
Yes, I believe it.
Right.
All right, so let's move on to the Chicago Bears. And I'm with you, Jacob. I feel like the Bears had a pretty good draft class, and I know people say that every year, but I like what they did, kind of attacking offensive line as well as trying to get Caleb Williams some weapons here. They went Colston Loveland with the 10th overall pick. I think that's a fantastic pick there. Of course, it's hard to screw up a top 10 draft choice. In the second round, they went Luther Burden the third. There's a lot of people that like Luther Burden. He was a little bit lower on our board. I don't know if you've got the board pulled up or not, Emilio, but I'd like to see where some of these players were on our board. Not, if you can just read them off whenever you get a chance. If you had to step away, we'll wait till you get back. No big deal. But so Colston Loveland in the first round, Luther Burden, the third, wide receiver out of Missouri in the second, Ozzie Trapillo in the second round. You had Shamar Turner, edge defender from Texas A&M in the third round. Fourth round, Jacob Parrish, cornerback out of Kansas. You guys know we mocked him in our mock drafts a lot because we liked where he sat on the board when we picked a little bit later. Kyle Manangai? Is that how you would say that?
Sounds about right. Manangai.
Running back out of Rutgers. And then round 6, you got Steven Saninola out of Vandy. And then you've got round 7, Chris, I want to say Hippo, but
I think it is Chris Hippolyte.
Yeah, Hippolyte, right? Linebacker out of South Florida. A lot of these guys are who? But at least those last 3 picks. But where did we have Luther Burden on our board, Emilio?
On our board, Mr. Burden was 28.
28. So that's a good pick. And listen, I'm not going to just dog these guys because the Bears drafted them. We're going to talk about where they were on our board and where we've seen value, right? That's a good value pick for them at 39, no doubt. Ozzie Trapillo at 41. I can't remember if he was a little lower or if that's about where we had him there as well. Ozzie
was 78 on our board.
So that's a little bit of a reach there, quite a reach, about a full round, right? And then Shamar Turner with pick 72.
We've got some. B. Timmy says that this is an inaccurate Bears draft. That the Rutgers running back was in the 7th round. That Ozzie was picked 56.
Really?
That Shamar Turner was the 2nd round.
Shamar Turner went in the 2nd round.
I don't know.
Let's drop this down. He's probably right.
Let's see. I got it here, actually. Let me see.
Chicago had Colston at 10, Luther at 39.
Yeah, he's right.
Ozzie at 56, Riley Leonard at 62.
Thank you for checking that. Appreciate that. Let me go ahead and pull up their draft class number website real quick.
Yeah, that back end is completely wrong. Yeah. Shamar Turner was in the 2nd round. Ruben Hippolyte II was the first guy that we didn't have on our board, Emilio.
Correct.
One of the only that was not on our board. That was in the 4th round. They got Za Frazier, the cornerback, in the 5th round, and they took Luke Newman, your boy, out of Michigan State. They got him in the 6th round, and the 7th round was Kyle Manangai, the running back out of Rutgers.
Good grab there. Thank you for spotting that for us there, bub. Let's see if we can get it to pull up. I'd like to get a visualization of it here.
Mandy was saying that Jacob Parrish got drafted by Tampa Bay. That's right, in the 3rd.
Got it. All right, so that was completely screwed up then.
Buckets
we all make mistakes.
Fired.
Emilio, we all make mistakes, right, buddy?
No, Buckets is fired after an act like that.
Buckets
got a family, dude. Come on.
All right, we're going to have Ad Central here, but here we go. So this is their 2023 class. Wonderful. All right.
We are off to a roaring
I don't want
start.
to pat you on the butt and you poop my hand. So
this is what happens when you try to answer a listener question 30 minutes before the show and go, I'm going to put something together for this real quick. You rush through it. Do they really not have just an image of their draft class? This is unbelievable. I'm just going to pull up ESPN.
That's terrible.
It is terrible, Chuck. I'm glad somebody acknowledged it. Jeez, Pete. All right, here we go. So Colston Loveland at 10. Obviously, that was correct. Luther Burden at 39. Got that. So that was good value there. And then Ozzie Trapillo at 56. So it's still a reach by what, 20-some picks roughly? Is that right, Emilio?
Yep.
All right. Then you got Shamar Turner at 62. Where did you say Shamar Turner was on the board?
130.
130. So that's a reach, right? So maybe this draft class isn't as good as we thought, Jacob, according to our board anyway, right? Mm-hmm. Next, you've got Ruben Hippolyte. In the round 4.
On the board.
Not even on the board.
Reach of all reaches right there.
Wow. All right, round 5, Za Frazier, 148. Okay.
236.
Reaching.
Luke
Newman, 195. Offensive lineman out of Michigan State.
I did like Luke, but he's 258.
Reach.
And then round 7, 233, Kyle Mananengai. Right?
142.
Ooh,
so that was a good pick.
Good deal there.
All so right. According to our board, 3, maybe 4 picks, right? Pretty solid. So, and when you look at like how much did they help themselves in terms of trying to make up some ground in the North, Colston Loveland, I think, is going to be a playmaker. I think that's someone, at least everything we've gotten up to this point, I think you got a legit shot for him to contribute for the Chicago Bears, right? And, of course, Luther Burden. Now, listen, there's some people that love Luther Burden in the draft process, and then the second the Bears took him, all of a sudden they don't like him. I don't like that kind of – that's dirty pool where I come from. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's good value. Ozzie Trapillo from that point on, nah. So my question is Luther Burden going to get on the field for the Bears? You know, that's the big question. What do you guys think? Because, I mean, they're kind of stacked at wide receiver, right? At least the way the Bears fans talked last year anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to, right? He's a second-round draft pick because they still got the couple old guys, and then they've got Rome. I think he's a legit 4th round or a fourth string receiver that I think he has to play. You got to get him on there sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to kind of look at Lions offense last year, see how often they went 4 wide of actual wide receivers, because that seems like it doesn't happen as much now in the NFL. You know, if you're going
Bears.
4 wide, right? I mean, you walk out the tight end out there, so yeah, I don't know, man. You do have to get him on the field for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, up next, let's go Detroit Lions this time. All right, number 28 pick overall, Tyleik Williams. I feel like that was a little bit of a reach, Emilio. Is that true? Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, defensive tackle.
Hold on. Yeah, he is a reach. I haven't been clicking on the board in a minute. I'm all over 36.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a reach, but still within striking distance, right? So, All right. Next, you've got Tate Ratledge with pick number 57, obviously an interior offensive lineman out of Georgia. I know a lot of guys like him a lot.
To the first pick, he was like 3 spots ahead of Matthew Golden. So, you know, we took him in the first as well. Tate Ratledge, 61 on our board.
Yeah, so that's within striking distance there. Pretty solid pick. Next, you got number 70 overall, Isaac Tesla.
That was an interesting one. That was a fan favorite of mine, but I thought that was way too soon. And I think he was one of the biggest reaches.
Yeah, 262.
Damn.
Big reach right there for sure. All right, and then 171, they got Miles Frazier. Pick 196, Ahmed Hassanan, I guess is how you say it.
Yeah, Miles Frazier was a good snag. 103 on our board, guard LSU. And then
solid pick, yeah.
Ahmed Hassani is 231 on our board.
Got it. All right, and then, of course, Dan Jackson, Dominic Lovett, wide receiver out of Georgia as well. Chuck Norris says, I avoid these 3 foods like the plague. So there you go.
Dan Jackson, 475.
Dang. Wow. All right. So there you go. That's your Detroit Lions draft class. What's your all's thoughts there? Do you think the Packers outperform them in the draft, or do you think the Lions come out on top there? I like Tyleik Williams. I really like that pick personally.
Yeah, I thought that was a kind of a weak draft, to be honest. I mean, they definitely did try to go in the trenches. Mm-hmm. It wasn't terrible. I think Ratledge was good. Tyleik's good. Frazier could be good. Ahmad should be good. Honestly, that's probably not terrible. I don't quite like the last 2 picks, but
yeah, I don't think it's a super great draft. I think they have to make a lot with what they got for sure. But the only one that was really a deal was the Frazier cat. Miles Frazier, the guard out of LSU, Senior Bowl player.
Got it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's see if we could get the Vikings pulled up here now. Minnesota Vikings draft class. You've got round 1, pick number 24, Donovan Jackson, guard out of Ohio State. I'm trying to think, was he in the 30s for us, Emilio? Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State.
Jackson would be 49 on ours.
Okay, so quite a reach there by 25 spots, right?
Yep.
And then next you got, did they not have a second round pick? They did not.
But I believe he was the second interior lineman available on the vertical.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know our board, like the first 2 rounds, it pretty much went in order by position for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, besides Gray Zabel, he was 3rd on the list.
Got it. Interior. All right, next you've got Ty Felton, wide receiver out of Maryland at pick 102. Where do we have Ty on our board here?
Mr. Ty, we liked a lot. We had him at 107.
So right there in striking range for sure. And then all the way down to the 5th round, they go Tyrion, I guess is how you say it, Ingram Dawkins, defensive lineman out of Georgia. And there's Chuck Norris promoting.
320.
320, wow.
Ingram Dawkins, yep.
And Gavin Bartholomew, tight end out of Pittsburgh. Then, of course, Kobe King, linebacker out of Penn State. I want to say we liked Kobe King early in the process, but toward the end, man, we really I don't know, just kind of realized he started sinking on our board the further we got into the process.
Gavin we had at 364.
Okay.
And who was the last one? I'm sorry. Kobe King.
Kobe King, yeah.
Kobe King was 132.
So that's a solid pick. Okay, so he was higher than I remember. So when you look at the Vikings, what do you think? Packers or Vikings, better draft class?
Honestly, I don't like what they did at all. Like I said earlier, my friends that are diehard Viking fans, they didn't understand the picks. I mean, they needed O-line help, but not necessarily where they took them. They thought they could have gotten a lot better value with that first-round draft pick. They needed a lot of help in the cornerback room, a lot of help in the safety room with how old Harrison Smith is. And you could argue that they probably needed some more interior D-line help, and then probably just more offensive help. And they went with some kind of head-scratching picks like that Georgia guy. They did go Kobe King, but then coming around with Gavin Bartholomew. I mean, I don't know. To me, I don't like any of their picks, to be honest. So I think that we definitely had a better one.
All right, what about you, Emilio?
Absolutely. I'm right there with Jacob. I think that they struggled, man. They didn't have a lot of options and, didn't make great use out of it. Spent a lot of money in free agency too.
Yeah. So when you look at just the draft classes, and that's what AZ Marky Mark was asking, like, who do you think kind of had the better draft classes, essentially what the question was. I think Chicago comes the closest to the Packers draft class, but really when you look at the Packers draft class, the only real reach we had, like where you're like, wow, that's a significant reach in my opinion, was probably Anthony Belton. And again, man, when you look at Goody's track record drafting offensive linemen, you feel pretty good outside of the center position. Of course, I can't remember. He didn't draft Elton Jenkins, did he? Or did he? He may have. Yeah, he drafted Elton Jenkins, didn't he?
Goody did? I think he did.
I think he did.
I believe
yeah.
so.
Yeah. So anyway, you look at your Zach Toms, your Rasheed Walkers, guys like that. You feel real good about how he can evaluate Anthony Belton for sure. I like the Matthew Golden pick. Maybe it's not as sexy as an Ibuka pick would have been, but it's obvious that they like Matthew Golden better than Ibuka. Seemed like it anyway. So now, when you look at what they did last year, and again, remember with the standings, if the Packers truly did come out with a better draft class, you kind of like your standing there with the Packers still winning 11 games. Here's the other thing to take consideration. The Vikings, who's their quarterback now? It's going to be a first-year starter in J.J. McCarthy, right? Sam Darnold he played like an MVP candidate a good chunk, if not all of last season until they got into the playoffs, of course, and they laid the egg, right? Detroit Lions, when you look at what they got returning, yeah, they got pretty much their roster coming back for the most part. Now, maybe they have lost some key pieces, I don't know, but the important pieces I feel like are still there. But they lost their OC and they lost their DC, right? So when you're replacing both coordinators, you got to expect a little shakeup there for sure. Now with the Bears, the big knock on the Bears for me is Caleb Williams just going to hold the rock and allow himself to be sacked after 4.5 seconds all year long again, right? Now, they did protect the football, as we'll get into some of the key statistics. But based off of what we just said, first-year starting quarterback, the division leader losing both coordinators, and the fact that the Packers pretty much had a better draft class, I'm liking our chances of taking the North back, to be honest with you. Now, it's going to be – obviously, you got to get out there and get the job done. But when you look at the offense points per play, these are the three statistics from a team standpoint that I think are most important in determining the value of a team, right? Opponent point or offense points per play. Detroit led the league at 502. What's going to happen to their offense to make that drop? That's the question. They're pretty much getting everybody back on offense in terms of the starters, right, and their weapons and their quarterback and all that. Yep. But they lost their OC. So how far do they sink? Do they sink 4 or 5 spots? Do they stay in first place? You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I can't imagine they're just going to maintain that top spot after losing their offensive coordinator. So that's
plus. Sorry to interrupt you, but isn't Campbell kind of known for not being the brains of the operation in that offense? Like that was definitely the OC, right?
He was never the play caller. I know that.
That's
if that
what I mean.
answers your question, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Now, listen, you got different kinds of coaches. You got some guys that are play callers. You got some guys who are team builders. You got some guys who are motivators, right? He's definitely a motivator. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah.
Matt LaFleur, he's a play caller, and then when you look at the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, play caller. And now when you look at the Detroit or the Chicago Bears, play caller, right? So, yeah, I think if he is truly a motivational style coach, Jacob, then probably going to take a step back, seeing that they're going to be relying on a first-year offensive coordinator. Maybe he's got some experience, the new OC. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, they finished first last year. That was a big difference there. Now you go down, the next NFC North team is the Green Bay Packers at .432 points per play. All right. So they were 8th in scoring last year, a legit top 10 scoring offense. You got Minnesota in the 10 spot at .392. Again, first year starting quarterback. I can't imagine that improves unless Emilio, either JJ McCarthy's going to be a dog or they're going to take a step back. There's nothing in between, right?
Yeah, he won Coach of the Year last year. O'Connell did. So it's like, I don't know if you're going to have that kind of same season here. You got a different quarterback. You got new pieces. And really, what is JJ going to have? How's he coming back out of that injury? How does it feel? And, getting everybody to gel, all the timing, all those aspects. I think that it's going to be a bumpy start for him. I still think that they probably – I think Detroit and probably the Vikings and us would all break double-digit wins. The question is, how's it going to finish out?
Exactly. All right, so let's see where Chicago was. Looky there, Chicago 28th.
Ooh.
All-world Caleb Williams with 2 number 1 wide receivers. I'm telling you, they're going to set the world on fire, right? Good running game, too, so we were told by the mainstream national sports media. They finished 28th in the league in points per play, all right? Let's go to yards per play. To me, this is the best judge of how effective is your team at moving the ball down the field, right? Detroit was 2nd at 6.3. Green Bay was 5th at 6.1. Keep in mind, that's with your starting quarterback battling 3 injuries all year long, too.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty darn impressive. And your wide receivers leading the league in drops as well. Yeah. So Green Bay coming in 5th place there. Next will be Minnesota in the 13 spot at 5.5 yards per play. And then, of course, you've got the Chicago Bears dead last, 32nd at 4.5 yards per play there.
They won the offseason, though.
They did, once again. They won last offseason, right?
I know.
One before that, too. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, again, when you look at those numbers and expecting Detroit to drop, I think the Packers could pass them up in offensive yards per play if they do drop because of the OC moving on. And I don't expect Minnesota to jump. If anything, they'll just kind of stay pat. So I think by the end of the year, if barring any crazy injuries within the Green Bay Packers roster, I think there's a decent chance that you will be leading all 4 teams in offensive yards per play, for sure. Next, you've got giveaways. We talk about turnover differential all the time, right? Offensive giveaways per game. First team from the NFC North, looky here. Chicago Bears at a positive 0.9. So they actually protected the football pretty darn well, right? This is obviously less numbers towards the top. Now, again, people pointed that out with Caleb Williams. Man, his touchdown to interception ratio was good for a rookie quarterback. Yeah. And he also just decided to take long sacks over and over and over. Now, when you see this statistic, it really doesn't line up with the previous 2 we looked at, right? So this is a good example of, yeah, you can protect the football, but if you're not pushing the ball down the field, you're not putting points on the board, it doesn't make a hill of beans, right? So Chicago did lead there. However, I would expect them to drop in this ranking personally as the season goes along. Now, Detroit did pretty good, also in the 11th spot at 1.1 giveaways per game. Then you had Green Bay in the 17th spot at 1.3. The fact that we won 11 games and we were in the middle of the pack and giving the ball away really, really says a lot about this coaching staff. And then, of course, you got Minnesota tied with us there at 1.3 as well. So anything you guys want to add to the offensive conversation? And based off what we've seen there and the changes that have been made going into this offseason, actually as the offseason's finished now, do you think Green Bay's got a shot offensively to overtake the North?
I mean, I really do. What we just laid out, the changes in Detroit, the changes in Minnesota are pretty glaring. I think that, honestly, the Bears and us have the best shot of taking another step forward. The Bears, because they've got nowhere to go but forward pretty much in a lot of these categories. But, I mean, honestly, yeah, again, not sounding like a homer. If you just look at everything, the Packers were so close. We didn't have a ton of gaps last year. It's just that the gaps that we had became so glaringly obvious in that Philly game and towards the end of the season that was our Achilles heel. There just was no way around it. But, I mean,
I think another reason that we won that draft is because we didn't have that many needs to plug and fill. We had a very specific niche of maybe bolstering one more solid offensive lineman, a few more key components on the defensive side, maybe another wide receiver or two, obviously, to kind of mix things up. And we did that and then some. So I think that a lot of these other teams, especially Minnesota, especially Chicago, they just have so many different holes that they need guys to either step in or fill. That's and they tried to do a lot of it in free agency, like Emilio said. And we obviously didn't do barely anything. So I'm kind of confident where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Greg Rice says, did Caleb lead the NFL in sacks and holding the ball? I know the last I heard, Greg, I can't remember what it was. It was a national podcast too. Like it was a well-known podcast. I remember they pointed it out that he had taken more sacks holding the ball for longer than for 4.5 seconds or longer than anyone else in the league. And the second place person, the second longest one, was he almost doubled them, if I remember. So that's what killed their offense last year. There's no two ways about it, Greg. And in terms of Matt LaFleur, I just want to point out, your quarterback battled 3 injuries all year long. He had a huge turnover problem. Your receivers led the league in drops, right? And you still won 11 games and had a top 10 offense. Somebody explain that to me. Can we put some respect on Matt LaFleur's name?
Seriously.
And again, one of the all-time winningest coaches as it sits right now. So I think he's top 20 all-time winningest coaches in the history of the National Football League. So, and again, what he did with Malik Willis too, just plugging and playing Malik Willis in a pinch.
Right.
So,
and big on our defense too, to put us in that situation with the turnovers, with the sim pressure, and hey, we're rolling right into it. Here we go.
Yeah, definitely. All right, next, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Defense, opponents' points per play. All right, so again, toward the top, we're going low number toward the top. Look at Green Bay, 5th in opponent points per play. Minnesota was right above them at 4th. So their defense, very, very underrated last year at a .318. So Minnesota, then Green Bay, then Detroit in the 11th spot at .355. And then, of course, Chicago in the 17th spot at .360. So with Minnesota, I think their defense will probably maintain that level of competitiveness, that level of success when it comes to their defense.
Absolutely.
I could see that kind of stabilizing and them still being a little bit better than the Packers potentially. When it comes to Detroit, I think they'll take a slight step backwards, seeing that they lost Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator. So if they drop to around the 14 or 15 spot, obviously that helps the Packers' chances of winning the North. And then Chicago, bringing in a new coaching staff, I'm pretty sure they overhauled the defensive room as well, Emilio. So .360 was their 17th. So maybe they get a little bit better, but I don't think they'll surpass the Packers, who were a top 5 defense last year.
No, I don't think so either. And that's why Jacob left, because he didn't want to hear about the top 7 and getting his tattoo figured out. So I get him on that. But, man, really looking at the defense, Hafley was absolutely was in the bag. We talk about Matt being in the bag. I think Hafley really was with what he was given. A lot of rookies, a lot of young guys trying to figure out what they're doing. And dude, they just performed. I think, like you said, Minnesota's going to be tough. Let's see how their safeties hold up and getting a new one, have Smith back there. And then Chicago, their defense was their strong suit for the longest point last year. And until that Washington game, they thought that defense was going to be shut down. After that, man, I think it just opened up a crater in it.
Definitely. All right, up next. Defense opponent yards per play. All right, Philadelphia, no surprise, led the league at 4.8 yards per play allowed. Green Bay was 5th at 5.2. And then you had Minnesota 10th at 5.3. And then, of course, you probably have – did we already say Detroit? We did not say Detroit, did we? Detroit was 29. Ooh. Look at that, 5.8. So that tells you how good the red zone defense was, right? The fact that they – were able to stay, in the upper half of the league in points per play, but then turn around with yards per play. They got chewed up, 29th at 5.8, tied with Chicago. I can't imagine that. I mean, maybe that will get better this year because it's hard to get any worse, but you kind of like Green Bay's chances there too in terms of what they did in the offseason. Like I think that It'll be them in Minnesota in that regard. It's kind of feeling like if Minnesota had brought back Sam Darnold, I think Detroit maybe takes a step back and Minnesota kind of steps up, and it's Green Bay and Minnesota towards the top. Not that Detroit wouldn't have a chance. Anything can happen. But it kind of feels like Minnesota would have been toward the top. But, man, them going with the first-year starting quarterback, I keep coming back to that. Like, I can't expect them to play better than they did last year on offense. So defense.
No, I mean, we kept saying that with Jordan Love too. I mean, you're gonna go through some growing pains. There's no way they're back to 14 this year. So you're gonna have to pick a number below that. And like you said, a young guy, new starting, figuring it all out, a lot different game speed and everything. I think Soder makes a good point here. For the Packers specifically, said really need the Packers to control the first quarter on offense this year. Need more fast starts. We were asking for that. And you know what happened was penalties slowed us down. I mean, holding calls, Matt LaFleur, the fact that we had double-digit penalties, like the first month of the season, first 2 months maybe, we were like averaging 10 a game. Mm-hmm. That was a problem. I mean, I think that we need to come out of the gates a lot hotter this year, and I think that we can. You know, you get everyone a year further, and these rookies coming in are more add-on pieces. Last year they were a lot more, like full-on pieces to this team.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Arguably the second most important statistic in the game of football are takeaways, right? You know, forcing turnovers, winning that turnover differential, which drastically increases your chance of winning the ball game. Minnesota Vikings were second in the league last year at 1.8 takeaways per game, right? You want to know why they won 14 games? That's probably the most important statistic right there. They were taking the ball away from their opponent, no doubt. Yep. Next, you had Green Bay in the 6th spot at 1.7. We know that was a big part of our defense, especially in the first half of the season. So it kind of helped us get off to a roaring start. Chicago finishing top 10. They're not at 1.4 takeaways per game. But, again, that coaching staff has been overhauled. We'll see if it's to the positive or to the negative there. And then, of course, Detroit 11th at 1.3. I think this is a really, really good statistic to use to go, okay, why did the NFC North dominate the way they did? Got to be the takeaways per game. It really does. So
I think it's true, man. We were hype at X when we went to Tennessee. We got to see that. I mean, in person, it saved our offense. The fact that our defense had that kind of spark coming out the gate, I think that really saved the offense, gave them time to get their feet under them and go. This year, I don't think we have time really for, get the offense, get their feet under them.
Yeah, and Jair Alexander with the pick 6, that was a blast. Yep. LVN, I thought he took Will Levis's life when he sacked him that time. LVN fighting through a double team. Will Levis scrambles out, and he did not see LVN breaking away from that double team. Clean.
Came right to the sideline and said, "Thank you to Rashawn. You forced that one."
Yeah, exactly. Pointer Doug says Green Bay at 5. That blows me away. You know, the big thing I think that catches people off guard too there, Doug, is on the offensive side of the ball, man. When you hear people talk about Matt LaFleur and talk about Jordan Love, you'd think they were one of the worst offenses in the league. And they legit were 8th in scoring. They were 5th in yards per play, moving the ball, right? And the only thing that really hurt them the most was that giveaways per game. That's right. It. You get that down under 1, that puts you in the top 10.
Top 10. That's all you ask for. You don't have to be perfect.
Right. Exactly. If you get that around that 1 mark, you're probably going to win another game or two. And where's that going to put you? 12 to 13 wins, right? Yep. As opposed to 11. I'm excited about the schedule release coming up here in less than 2 weeks, right? If I remember correctly. Actually, when is it coming out on the 14th? Is that right? We got
the schedule release? Yeah.
Yeah, May 14th, right? Yeah, so we'll have that here coming up real soon. So yeah, we're.
I was listening to a pod about that. The dude that was that like does the schedule or whatever. The fact that it's like he goes, well, we want to give the draft its light and all that shining. All right, cool. Let's get the draft taken care of. A little bit of downtime, and then it's like a revamp. We talk about there's not a lot of dead time. Get that revamp, get the schedule out. People have enough time. But the amount of scenarios that they go through, I mean, they're thinking about like every little thing. You got to worry about Netflix, you got to worry about YouTube, you got to worry about Fox. Everybody gets their own cut of the pie, and there's just a lot of moving parts in that schedule, man.
Yeah. So again, when you take everything into consideration, the offseason moves, the coaching staff shakeup, the first year starting quarterback, I think the Packers got a legit shot to win the North.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I think there's a legit shot. If we go back to the original standings again, the Lions finished 15-2. I do not see that happening again. Now, could they win 12, 13 games? Absolutely. I don't think they'll sniff 15 though. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say they fall back to 12 or 13 wins. Let's call it 12, right? The Vikings were the first year starting quarterback. If they drop back to 10 or 11 and the Packers take a step forward at 12 or 13 wins, you could potentially win the North this year, man. You're right back on top. And it's going to come down to protecting that football, man.
Yeah, and I think right here, Greg here, I hope we go undefeated in the NFC North. And Eldergrim said, can't do any worse than last year, only up from here. And that's the truth because, I mean, we would be in better shape if we had won a couple of those NFC North games. You know, the Lions wouldn't be in such good shape. The Vikings wouldn't be in such good shape if we even just split them. I mean, we just took L's just across the board, basically. So that's going to be huge this year. I think Matt's got to set that. That's what, six games that you could come home with a win. That's a third of your schedule right there that you can take care of, that you know those teams.
Yep. I like our chances, guys. I really do. I think the Packers got a legit shot to win the North and not give it back. So excited to see the schedule release, and then we can kind of do our annual predicting how many games the Packers are going to win. Last year, I settled in at 10 to 13 wins. We finished with 11. I think if Jordan Love isn't battling those 3 injuries, you're probably closer to 13 than you are 11. So, all right, that's going to do it for hour 1. And again, AZ Marky Mark in our Patreon group questions. Thank you so much for that question. I thought that's a fascinating conversation. I'll get the article updated with the proper